This is Event Masters. Behind the scenes stories, experiences, and lessons shared by the world's leading event experts. Hosted by Christian Napier.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Event Masters, which is a behind the scenes look at the stories and experiences and lessons learned gained by the world's leading event experts. I'm Christian Napier, and super thrilled to be joined by our next guest, Mr. Michael Wingate. Michael, how you doing?
Very good, sir. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing just fabulous. We're now in the thick of my favorite time of the year, this holiday season.
Nice.
And I'm here at home in Salt Lake City, Utah. But where are you joining me from?
I'm joining you from Florence, South Carolina, a little small town in between Columbia and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Wow, South Carolina. So is that the location? Is it the permanent location? Is that where you're living now? Is in South Carolina?
It is the location of my parents' home. So I'm with my aging parents. Yes.
Well, good on you for caring for them. But I know this work takes you all over the world, and I want to talk about that a little bit because you're one of the segments of professionals that are known in the industry as games gypsies or event gypsies. And I'm going to ask you about that a little bit because you have lived with your family all over this planet. But just to give our viewers and listeners a little bit of background on you, you are the man that people call when they need help with logistics. Logistics being absolutely a critical area of events, and you've been a professional logistics manager for 3 decades, going all the way back to Atlanta, I think. And I'll ask you about how you got into it here in a little bit, but you have worked on events like the Olympic Games, FIFA World Cup. I know earlier this year you were up in Lake Placid doing the FISU Winter Universiade there. And again, been involved in more than 17 major super high profile domestic and international events. And so it's an honor to have you on here because nobody knows logistics more than you do, and I'm really I'm grateful to have you here with us today, Michael. Before we get into some of the key lessons that you've learned and stories that you want to share, why don't you take us back to the beginning and describe for us how you got involved, A, in logistics, and B, in major events.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me, Christian. It is an honor to be here. You are a leading voice in the event industry and telling the stories, and we really appreciate it. So again, thank you for having me. But to answer your question, I got started in events, and I want to say it's a God thing, and I know you know what that means. A God thing, and also a lot of people had a lot of hands in this. So I'll go back to the beginning, and I'll try to tell the story without crying because it really touches my heart. But I was working in Atlanta as a security guard, and I happened to be working in the same building as the Olympic Committee. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of people. And of course, one day, using my incredible wit and charm, I was able to get a position as a clerk in a department called the Equal Economic Opportunity. It's a department that's really advocates for minority and women-owned businesses to get access to Olympic contracts. Well, there was an email that went out probably a couple of months before the large test event season asking for non-essential personnel to give names so that they can work on events. So fast forward, a young lady by the name of, you know this person, Jean Marie Morrissey. She was working in volunteers at that time, and she put my name into logistics. Again, she didn't think it was just filling a slot for her, but that was a life-changing moment for me. She put my name in logistics, and I was teamed with another name that you know, Ron Delmont. We happened to be working at the Clark Atlanta University, and we're actually bumping in for a test event that's happening there. So I meet Ron, and he tells me, okay, here's the warehouse. Here's all the items that's going to go in the spaces. Here's the maps. So we're going to go and do this. And when we start to do the work, miraculously, he gets a call to go to a meeting. So I'm sitting here with this map and with these items and with these dollies, and I could either wait for him to return, or I can go ahead and do it myself. So we ended up putting, or I ended up putting the items in the spaces until he came back. And once he emerged or re-emerged, all the items were done for that particular space. And then we would start on another space, and he would tell me, okay, here's the map. Again, same concept. Here's the map, here are the items, and this is how it goes. So miraculously, again, he gets called to another meeting. Now, I've yet to ask him were these meetings actually factual meetings or not, but he gets called to another meeting, and I begin to do the same process of moving the items into the particular spaces. When I say that, I heard the angels singing, the heavens opened up, and all of that. That's what happened, because I actually loved, I loved that time there. I learned a lot, and I felt that I was good at it. So fast forward again, I'm working back in EEO, the Equal Economic Department, and me and my boss are not getting along at all. And I mean at all. I'm contemplating quitting. So a shout out to another young lady. Her name is Deborah Mathis Browder. She said, hang on a minute. Before you make a drastic move like that, let me make a phone call. She calls Ron Delmont and reminds Ron about me and says, I need you to hire this guy. And so he did. And again, 3 people I've already mentioned who just doing their jobs in their normal everyday life had a life-changing experience or made a life-changing experience for me. So I get transferred into logistics, and again, heavens, angels singing, and I am placed as the venue logistics manager for one of the events, one of the venues there in Atlanta. So at the end of the event, another friend of mine by the name of Tadero Bates, who was a former security officer who also got promoted and got a job with the Atlanta Olympic Committee, he gave me this advice that he probably thinks is nothing, but he said, you know what, Michael, I think you can be one of those persons that travel around the world and execute these events. And that sentence alone made a real big difference to me, and it birthed something in me. And therefore, I was like, it gave me the confidence that, okay, maybe I can do this work and travel along with these other talented individuals. And you would think, I wish I had a story that says, and that, spurred me on to move to this. But what happens? I got married. I had 2 kids. I had responsibilities. So it wasn't in the cards to actually chase the Olympic dream at that time. But somewhere down the road, I had this moment where I got the burning, the yearning to join the Olympic Committee again. And I called Ron Delmont and I said, Ron, I'm here in Atlanta, but I would love to join the movement again. Are there any opportunities available? He said, hang on a minute. And the next thing you know, 2 months later, me and my family, my dog, my car, we're all packed up and we're moving to Salt Lake City, where I meet you and other talented people there in Salt Lake to put on the games. And really, that's where it really, I realized that this is something that I want to do. However, my oldest daughter begged me, like, Dad, I don't want to travel, from school to school. Can we please, can we stay in one location for my high school career? And I was like, baby, that's a fair answer and a fair question. I will definitely do that. So we moved back to Atlanta, and we were working there with Miss Mathis Browder again. And I got the bug again, Christian, to join the movement and started traveling, and decided at that point that traveling is what I really want to do and executing these events. So I would say after Salt Lake City, after my oldest daughter graduating, shout out to Jasmine, I decided to, just travel the world and see where this adventure takes me. So that's how I got in events, and And I've been very lucky and very blessed over my career to travel the world and do what I love. And not many people in this world can say that they actually get paid to travel and do what they love. So very lucky person, very blessed person.
It's a fantastic story. There's a lot to unpack there, Michael. But a couple of things I want to ask you about it. Number one is, could you comment just a little bit more on these seemingly very insignificant acts by other people that had dramatic impacts on your life? So
Yeah.
you mentioned Jean Marie is just, going through a list of people and saying, hey, maybe an opportunity for you to do this here, that, there, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All the way to you picking up a phone and calling Ron Delmont and asking him if there's any, if he's aware of any opportunities. Have you ever thought what your life would be like if Jean Marie doesn't tick this box and say, hey, Michael, go over here? Or you say to yourself, nah, working those games was fun, but I don't know if I can call Ron up and see what's going on.
Exactly.
You ever thought what your life would have been like if these small little choices hadn't happened, where the trajectory of your life would have gone?
Again, this is the part that's very emotional. I think about it all the time, and I try to, at least as much as I can, to remind them of the impact they had on my life and my family's lives rather. And again, as you said, they didn't think anything of it. They don't really understand the significance, but I really try to just let them know that I really appreciate what they've done and the impacts that they've had on me and my family, because it is life changing. I had no idea, Christian, what I was going to do, how I was going to support two girls and a wife and a dog and, bills. I had no idea. So to be honest with you, I didn't finish college, so I did not have a path in terms of a clear path in terms of what I was going to do. But as I mentioned, when the heavens open and you hear the word from God that this is what you're supposed to do, I just ran with that and had trust that I was going to be okay. And again, the impact that these individuals had, really helped to solidify that. So I'm very thankful. And I
Well,
try to tell them all the time, which is why I'm shouting them out here in this interview. I really want them to know what kind of impact it really had.
well, they had huge impacts, clearly. Uh, the other part that I want to come back to that you talked about when you were sharing your genesis, your beginnings into this industry, was this notion that you actually wanted to travel the world. Uh, so we've introduced the term already, event gypsy, here
Mm-hmm.
in the interview. But there are different ways that people can get involved in these events. I mean, there are a lot of people who organize an Olympic Games or a FIFA World Cup or something, and then that's it, and they go back to their regular lives.
Mm-hmm.
There are some who stay in the industry that work for a large organization. It could be a sponsor or a supplier or something like that. They may have a home base, and then they kind of go, to the various events that they're working on. And fly in and fly out. And, I was an independent consultant for much of my career, but was doing fly in, fly out. I never actually relocated.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are people who, like you, go either work for the local organizing committee or for another organization that supports the organizing committee, but actually physically relocate for a period of time. It could be
Mm-hmm.
months, or it could be a year or 2 or 3. And, in some cases, you might be single and you just do that yourself, and in some cases you may be towing family along. And so I'm curious to know or to learn more about how you decided that I actually want to become one of these event gypsies, not just fly in, fly out, but actually physically relocate. And you mentioned that was kind of a challenge as your daughter got older and she wanted to go to the same one high school and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how that came about, how you decided I want to become an event gypsy, how your family reacted to this idea that yeah, we're going to pack up the car and the dog and we're heading out to Salt Lake City from Atlanta. How did that actually come about? And maybe you can just describe for us a little bit about what it's actually like to be an event gypsy on a day-to-day basis.
Great question. Yeah, we were the Black Clampets, but except we weren't moving to Beverly Hills, unfortunately. Um, when I had the full support of the family, and another thing that I could say that I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't. I was doing a job, and I was good at it, and I was happy doing the job, but it wasn't the job that I was supposed to do, what I was born to do. Again, you know this, when you have a path, when God gives you a path that you take this route and you choose something else, it may work for a while, but it's not what you're called to do. So I had to go back to what I was called to do. So therefore, sitting down and talking with the family, hey, we have this opportunity to move to Salt Lake City or move to another location. Of course, uh, my daughters weren't very happy about some of those decisions. But I will tell you this in terms of Salt Lake City. My oldest daughter at the time was going to middle school, and she did not want to go. By the time we left Salt Lake City, which was a year, I had people, multiple families calling my house asking if my daughter could stay with them to finish high school. And she was, really excited about the opportunity of staying in Salt Lake City to finish her career. Of course, no, honey, you have to come with us because you're our child, and that's not an option. But yeah, that was something that I thought was very interesting about this whole nomadic lifestyle. Incidentally, when the youngest daughter, we had an opportunity to move to Vancouver, and the youngest daughter at this point is going to middle school again. I think that's uh, it was anyway. She was going to middle school, so by that time the oldest daughter was in college, so she was kind of exempt from this whole move. But the youngest did not want to go to school. Didn't want to change schools. Did not want to leave the country and all those types of things. And again, her experiences were so great, and she enjoyed her time, and she met lots of people and was exposed to a lot of things. By the time we left, she was really, really upset about going back home. Now you think about that. She was upset about leaving, and now she's upset about going back home. So shout out to my youngest daughter, Michaela. She was, it was a life-changing moment for everyone to experience something new, to, hear different cultures and languages, and to experience different cultures and all those types of things. So I think it's a good thing for any, maybe jumping ahead, but I think it's a good thing for any family to, one, be exposed to something else, be exposed to whatever's out there in the world, because it is a big world. And as much as we Americans think that this is all and this is it, there's a lot of other interesting and valuable and cultures and languages and opportunities out there that you may not get here in the States. So that's my plug for travel. But
Well, I love.
sorry, Christian. One more thing. I will
Oh
also
yeah, go
add
ahead.
that the bug for travel was born very early, because and you might hear this in the Black family a lot. By the time you turn 18, you got to get out. That's not a request. That's a promise. So you have to. My parents encouraged us to get out and see the world, to experience something different than this small city of Florence. So that was born very early for me and my brother, and we've seen it, take root, manifest itself in this event gypsy career.
Well, coming back to what you were talking about with your daughters, and it's pretty rare for people to have that opportunity to allow their family, especially their children, to see these different parts of the world,
Mm-hmm.
experience these different cultures and languages and foods and so on and so forth. But that actually takes me back to the number one bullet that you had on your list, which is people are people.
Mhm.
And, just reading what you said here, regardless of the country, race, religion, color, etc., people are roughly the same all over the world. They want to live peaceably, love and provide for their families, earn a decent wage, go on a vacation, just everyday stuff. And so yeah, I want you to talk about that a little bit more, and how you discovered this, when you first went, from, say, Atlanta to Salt Lake. That's a very different environment.
Yes.
It's East Coast, we're more West.
Hmm.
Uh, certainly the African American population here is much smaller in percentage and real terms
Hmm.
in Salt Lake City or Salt Lake County in the state of Utah than it is back in Georgia. So yeah, one could be rightly assuming, well, gosh, I don't know if I want to go there. This seems really different. The people are very different. It could be kind of scary.
Yeah.
But over time, you learn this lesson that people are people. So why don't you kind of take us through that journey?
I'll tell you this, and this is where I realized that, or two stories from Salt Lake specifically. When we moved into our home, which was down in Sandy, so you exactly know where that is. We moved into a home on Sandy, and moved into a cul-de-sac. And when I tell you that three neighbors, the day after we moved in, came over and brought, you know, some drinks, and one, I think, bought a cake, and one had some rotisserie chicken or something to that effect. Came over and just knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we're your neighbors. Welcome to town, and call us if you need us. I live here. I live here, etc., etc." That never happens. Never happens in Atlanta, in South Carolina, in any of the neighborhoods that I was a part of. So you realize that you're in a very unique situation here, and just to let the guard down and just accept people as who they are. And that was a very humbling, very rewarding experience. Again, as I told you, they were calling my house to ask me if I would let my daughter stay with them for her high school career. So just the love that people showed was very good. Also, as I mentioned, my daughter, she was in middle school, and she had friends who wanted to go to the mall and just hang out. No, you're not going alone. You're going with an armed escort, et cetera, et cetera. But in Salt Lake City, we felt safe. The city, the state is a very safe. The culture is very religious based, so we felt safe to allow her to do that. And again, that's where you realize that people are people, and you just take people to where they are, and how they are, and accept that. But that story really was born from I'm in Korea, and I'm watching a World Cup match. And picture this: I'm in the press box. I have the opportunity to go to a press box, and I'm watching a match, and I'm looking down, and I see a man, a father, the wife, a young daughter who is every bit of 4 or 5, and then skip some rows, and I see a grandmother and a grandfather. So the men are on up each end, and they are glued to what's happening on the pitch. They're oblivious to everything else. Their focus is on the pitch. The mother has one of those Get Smart Gizmo bags, and it's about yay big. And she has everything imaginable in there. It's like it's a wizard hat. She keeps reaching in, and she's pulling out some random toy, cookies, snacks. I mean, she's a bottle. I wouldn't be surprised what else she had in that purse. And she's sitting there just as calm, not necessarily paying attention to what's happening on the pitch, but kind of watching her daughter. Again, skip over a couple of seats, and you have a older grandma type of person, and again, she is not paying attention to what's happening on the pitch, but she's kind of watching the young girl play, and she's playing between the 3 seats, and she's just having a good time, and she's going in her purse, and she's offering candy, And I'm looking at this scene. I'm like, oh my gosh, this happens in almost any sporting event, whether it's soccer or football or basketball, whether it's she's black or she's Asian or she's white or she's Korean. And I realized that this scene plays out more than not in everywhere. And that's when I really learned that, regardless of location, regardless of race and color and socioeconomic backgrounds and all of that, people are just the people all over the world. So it doesn't really matter. And we should be more accepting and more, uh, I can't think of a word, but we should be more accepting to people based on that. And we should not really look at our differences, but really celebrate the things that we have in common. I know it sounds cheesy, but man, this is just how I'm rolling these days.
Oh, hey, you're preaching to the choir here. I believe that 100 million% that people are people, and we all pretty much are wanting the same thing, and ultimately we have a lot more in common than we do differences.
That's for sure.
So I think that is it's absolutely vital. One thing though that I actually want to ask you about that kind of goes along with this is fundamentally we are the same, but there are differences, particularly in the way that things work in some of these countries. So organizing a major event in South America, in Brazil, may be different than in Vancouver, which may be different than in the Middle East, which may be different than in Europe, or as you mentioned in East Asia, there in Korea. So, how did you go about navigating some of those challenges of having to maybe adapt your way of working to the local context? Because, okay, I learned this is how we did it in Atlanta. Well, this is how we did it in Salt Lake. Okay, well, this is how we did it in Korea. Well, this is how we did it in Vancouver. This, this is how we did it in Sochi, et cetera, et cetera. So you're always adapting what you're doing to this local context, because although we are people, people are people, and we have similarities, the way that we work and the way that decisions are made and things are done in different countries may be quite a bit different.
Another great question. And I would answer that by saying that is a misnomer and something that a lot of event gypsies get wrong, where they walk into a different situation, a different city, a different culture, a different language, and assume that what they did previously is going to automatically apply here. Unfortunately, organizing events is not it's not cookie cutter. It's not square hole in the square, square peg in the square hole, and round peg in the round hole. It is, sometimes they have a mentality of this is my peg and it's going to fit everywhere, and it just doesn't work. So one of the things that I have been really lucky and blessed to have learned is that the event culture is, I would say, 55% of what you know, 45% of what you, or 40% of what you don't know, and 5% how the country itself does business. Or in other words, you have to understand how this country does its work to be successful. I'll give you an example there. In the Middle Eastern culture, you can't just walk into a random person's office and say, hey, I need XYZ. I need 2 people and 4 golf carts. You have to sit down. You have to ask them about their day. You have to have coffee. You may have to have some snacks. You may have to engage in random conversation just to understand, to have a rapport. And then you can ask for what you need. Now, in some cultures, that's like wasting time. Don't come in here with the extra conversation. Just tell me what you need, and then I can get on to what I'm supposed to be doing or what I was doing earlier. But in the Middle East, that's considered offensive. In some cases in the Middle East, you sit down and you take off your shoes and you sit, crisscross applesauce, and you have discussions like they did in their, in their cultural, native culture. Again, that's not something that we do in the West, but if you're in the Middle East and you're conducting business, this is something that you have to adapt to. I can give you some other examples of doing business in different cultures that I think should be out of the statute of limitations in terms of doing anything wrong. But in America, if you get, let's say you get stopped in a traffic accident, if you show any money, they automatically assume that's a bribe and therefore you're going to jail. I'm not going to say the country, but it is almost frowned upon if you don't show money in that country if you get caught, if you get stopped for a traffic violation. So it's just different ways to do business in different cultures. And again, that's the fun part of it because one, you get to learn and you get to share these stories as you progress in your career. So I love it. I love meeting new people and understanding how they do things because again, here in America, we don't have a lock on this is how it should be done. There is varying opinions of how it should be done, how it can be done, and therefore taking something from all of these groups and cultures and ideas makes the pot go well and keeps everyone engaged. So that is what I've learned in this process. But yeah, there are different ways to, as my grandfather used to say, shake a stick or something to that effect.
Well, I'm wondering if you can give us a specific example or story, and I'll lead with mine or one of them, right? So, just kind of flipping through the Rolodex in my memory. I remember working on the Asian Games Doha 2006, and and after the Commonwealth Games ended in Melbourne, there a lot of Australians came into Doha, to help with the final months of preparation for those games, and one of those had previously worked in Salt Lake City, and I knew her well, and when she arrived, I was so happy to see her. I just went and just gave her a big hug and just say, "How are you?" And immediately, I was pulled aside by one of the members of the organizing committee and say, "We don't do that here." And they were right. I had just temporarily forgotten where I was, I guess, and stepped outside of that cultural norm, and I was chastised, rightfully so, for doing what I did, and I was embarrassed at the time because I knew better. I'd been working there for a few months, and so I knew that I knew better, but it just happened. So I'm curious, on your side, if there's a specific particular instance, where you were that fish out of water and either did something or you saw something happen where you're like, oops, that would have been totally fine back in the States, but that's not fine here.
Yes. So again, statute of limitations, I will say that in one of the countries that I worked in, a person got in an accident. A person that reported to me got in an accident. And like in Pulp Fiction, I had to call the fixer. And the fixer and I and that person and another person went to the police station, and we had to exchange some money. We had to give some incentives to get some of the documents changed to what it would be more favorable for our insurance, for let's say the information flow. We gave some encouragement in the form of an envelope, and we walked out of the police station. One, no one went to jail. Two, no one was, let's say, chastised unfavorably. We got a police report that said, to the effect that some geese were hit or something to that effect. That was good for not only our insurance, but for the person that was also affected by the coming together of two vehicles. I'm trying to use my words carefully. So again, you would never you would never ever try to manufacture documents or change official documents in the States or in some of the Western countries in the event of an accident. But in this particular country, you're able to do that. In another country, you're able to pay some money to go purchase a driver's license, which would explain some of the accidents that you've seen in this country. But people could pay, let's say, in the form of 1,000, whatever their currency is, and pay to a person and pick up some driver's license. So again, you wouldn't imagine doing that here in the States because it's so regulated, but in some of the other cultures, it is possible, it's permissible. So, uh,
Yeah, I remember a time when we had some consultants and we had some people that were uh, gypsies living
mhm,
who had come overseas to work on a project, and they were allowed to be there for about 18 months, and then they needed to get out of the country to renew their visa.
mhm,
And we were trying to renew the visa while the person was in the country, but we were just kept running into a lot of roadblocks. And so uh, as the deadline was approaching, we were getting nervous. Like, what are we going to do with this person? Because their visa is going to expire and we're going
mhm,
to be in a bad situation. And so we decided to temporarily send this person out of the country to work on another project that we were doing, and then we were going to bring that person back.
mhm.
So the person was gone for about 6 weeks, and eventually we got put in touch with the right people in the country to say, well, just have them come back and we'll take care of it. And we're like, well, we can't just have them get on a plane without having a visa. And they're like, no, just have them get on the plane and we'll take care of it here. All right. So he gets on the plane and he gets to the airport, and the immigration official is looking at the passport and says, well, your visa here is expired. Um, so please come into this office over here. And so he goes into this office over here. And then they call in the person who runs immigration for that particular airport, this international airport, who comes in and says, oh, so what was your name? And he says, well, this was my name and this is my information, so on and so forth. He says, well, let me go check on this. And so he leaves for a couple of minutes, and then he comes back and he says, I don't see any problems here. Here, it looks like everything's set up properly in the system, so you're free to go, and stamps the passport with the visa, and that's it. Like you said, we wouldn't be doing that here. That would probably result in a crime, but there, it
Yes,
was had to be done. It's how
it's
it was done.
how you do
Uh,
business. Yes.
so I love these stories. Well, you mentioned the wolf, and that takes me to point number 3. Uh, uh, Logistics equals the wolf. So why don't you describe what you mean by that and the stories behind it?
So, to any of my Pulp Fiction fans, they remember when the gentleman was shot in the head and the face, and they had to go to, I think it was Jules, they had to go to another person's house to fix this issue because they had blood and such, and they were trying to avoid the law. So, they had to call the wolf to come over and help fix the problem. And the wolf comes over and they clean up the vehicle, they get scrubbed and they get changed, etc., etc. Again, for all my Pulp Fiction fans, you know that scene very well. Well, I use logistics as the wolf because a lot of times we're called to fix problems. As much as you know logistics and other functions, we plan to and we replan and we think about contingencies and et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes things happen where or either were forgotten, the stone wasn't overturned, or just things happen because they happen because it's an event And this isn't years and years of practice. This is a temporary event, and people are coming together, and there's a lot of moving parts. So sometimes things happen. In those instances when things happen, I give a shout out to one of my mentors, Stuart Ash, who says logistics is usually called to fix problems because we have resources, i.e., people, trucks, space, and therefore we can fix a lot of problems with a lot of those things. So therefore, logistics is called to fix sometimes other functions problems. And I don't want to say other functions like everyone does it wrong and logistics is the only function that does it right. But again, with those resources, you can overcome a lot of challenges in the event, in your event operations with those resources. So logistics is called to, let's say, hopefully overcome some of those challenges. That is.
Do you have a specific example? I mean, I can think of all different kinds of things that happen with sports equipment and, you know, other technical equipment and things of that nature, or FF&E kind of stuff that isn't where it's supposed to be or whatever. But, you know, as throughout your 30-year career, any specific experiences come to the fore of your mind, you know, when you talk about logistics being the fixer, the wolf, where you had to step in and take care of something?
There are lots of stories. I will tell you the first one will be in Atlanta. It is the Clark Atlanta University, and trash is piled up at the entrance of the loading dock. And I mean, not one or two bags. I mean, it's piled pretty high. And somehow the cleaning waste department hasn't been able to get a hold of this trash. And we have spectators that's going to be coming in less than 2 hours. And the athletes are already on site and they're training, et cetera, et cetera. So we get a call. Logistics, I know this isn't your role, but do you mind, because you have people and you have 2 pickup trucks on site, do you mind taking all the trash, putting it on the trucks and getting it out of here in time for the match? Well, of course, we're not going to let our venue manager down, and we're not going to say, no, that's not our role, because that's not what we do. So what do? We dispatch men and women and resources to that location to get the trash, put it in the truck, take it away. And we assist, moving forward, we assist our cleaning and waste team to stay on top of trash moving forward throughout those games. So again, it's not something that we were originally planned to do, but it is something that has to be done. I'll give you another, for example, and this was actually during a non-sporting event. So the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. It is July and it is hot, and there's a lot of concrete, and that sun is just baking people against that concrete. So logistics is charged with, hey, for safety reasons, here's a couple of coolers full of ice and water and other, energy drinks. Go around and pass these to people like are at transportation zones or police officers and in other locations where they're exposed and they don't have the opportunity to, cool off and stuff. And so therefore logistics is charged with going around and just making sure people stay hydrated. Again, not something that it is logistics responsibility to do, but we're happy to do that to make sure that everyone goes home safe and all that. So again, there are many stories like that of logistics stepping up to fix different issues within the organization, within their operations.
So when it comes to the job description of logistics, the little sentence that you often see in these job descriptions, which is other duties as assigned, right?
Yes.
Could be anything from picking up other people's trash and hauling it out to getting other people's drinks. It's whatever needs to be done.
Whatever needs
is
to be done.
done. Okay, there are a couple of other points on here I want to get to.
Okay.
So one point that you talk about is data acceleration and efficiencies. And what you state here is the use of data has not only enhanced the planning, but event gypsies like yourself have a much better understanding of the operations ahead of time. So I'm wondering if you can kind of talk through this point. I think it's a really interesting point that you make here with data acceleration and efficiencies.
So back when I was, getting involved in events back in the 1800s, we had folders, we had manila folders, we had books, paper, physical data that is not, let's say, easily transferable. Although there were um, mechanisms, and especially in the Olympics, where you transfer data from one organization to the other, but it was more high level and not necessarily very detailed. But again, I'll give an example of this. But as we move into a more information age and more electronic age, now you have greater amounts of data in smaller platforms, whether it's jump drives or on individual laptops, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it's definitely down to the lowest levels in terms of data now. So, with that acceleration of data, what you see is people are using that data now in advance of what you would have done in the past, and you're able to create visions or paint pictures, much like what I call actuaries do for the insurance companies. They see a person who is 47, black male, and therefore you fit into this area in terms of for insurance purposes, and they have data to support that based on a mean average across the states. Well, same thing now with the data that we see in events. You can project a lot of information based on data that you have from previous games. My example of that is, for instance, FF&E data capture. For those who don't know, FF&E stands for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, all the stuff that is required by each and every department. So in the past, we would have these reviews where you sit down your overlay team, your logistics team, your technology team, and like speed dating, you will sit in front of the overlay person and say, you're going to get a tent. This tent's going to be 10 by 10, and it's going to be in this location. Now move to logistics. Okay, in this particular tent, you're going to have one table, 3 chairs, a fan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you move down to your next person, technology, and you say, in this particular tent, you're scheduled to have a laptop, a USB port, et cetera, et cetera. So you walk out of there knowing all the commodities and all the things that you're going to have. Now, and with this new data, we don't ask those questions of what you need. Now we sit down, many months and sometimes years in advance to say, here is what your previous people in this particular role have used in these particular spaces. Tell me what we can take away or tell me what we need to add. But we're coming now from a position of strength. Instead of asking what you need and giving people blank shopping lists, now we give them, this is what you've had traditionally. Tell us what works, tell us what does not. So it gives us a greater opportunity to see more farther in advance, exactly the amount of FF&E that we're going to need. Well, then that helps us to drive what kind of warehouse space that we're going to need to fit all this FF&E. And that also drives, well, how many vehicles are we going to need to speak to when we're speaking to a distribution contractor? How many vehicles are we going to need? What's our per pallets that we're going to need? So we can extract a lot of data based on that information now, with knowing what has happened in the 3 previous winter games. And again, when you talk about Olympic games and then maybe a Pan Am games, you can reduce that by 15% or 50% or whatever the case may be. So it allows us to make a lot of projections now in the past that will help us to, let's say, plan for future. And we can do that farther in advance than we could before. Another example, Christian, is especially when you're talking about FF&E, when you're looking at the requirements of, let's say, in this particular venue, you also have existing furniture. Well, now it would have taken us when let's say the venue logistics managers on board, which are within a year of the opening ceremony, when they're allowed to or able to go to those locations and count the existing FF&E. Now, with this information that we have, we can do that much sooner because we already know our baseline. So it just allows us to be more proactive, give better projections, and using that data to our advantage to be able to be, budget. We can identify what our budget's going to be. We can identify, and that really helps with our procurement, because now we don't have to wait until the last minute to understand what our needs are. We can split that up and go 80-20. We can buy 80% of our items sooner and then let that 20% plus or minus based on as we get closer to the games. And therefore, we're not waiting on a large influx of items to come, which with supply lines and stuff, it could be, a big challenge for us. So we're able to do a lot more with data now based on the accessibility of data, whether it's, send me that file or give me a copy of that junk drive. So we're able to get more data now from not just the previous games, but, previous games in succession.
Well, I love that. And I'm sure that our mutual friend and colleague, Alan Shaw, will be very, very happy to hear all of this. He's been a huge champion of data capture and capturing actual usage, which was a big gap, historically in these major events, because you had all of the planning data, but you didn't know what was really actually used. And I know he spent a lot of time working on that. And selfishly, I've also worked on a couple of events with Alan, helping him in this area of data capture. And I think you're absolutely right. There are major efficiencies that can be gained if we just look carefully and track what has actually been used. And so I think that's fantastic. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. But ultimately, these events, they will happen because people have to come together and work together to make them happen. And that takes me to point number 5 on your list, which is relationships drive everything. It always comes down to people. And so why don't you tell us a little bit more about that point and some of the experiences that you've had that have really driven that home?
So there's procedures and policies in place to help people, navigate. You do step 1, step 2, step 3, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have learned is that even despite those procedures, you have to have relationships with different people in order to get things done. So as I mentioned, with the example of in the Middle East, walking into a person's office, you got to have the coffee, you got to have the tea, you got to sit down and have the snacks. You may have to visit the person's, go out and fellowship, at a bar or at, some other event. You have to invest in people's lives to build those relationships. And therefore, when you get to the venue, it is an easier call to make when you're calling a friend, say, Christian, I need some help. I have a situation here, and I have some drinks I need to distribute because it's hot outside, and therefore people need to be, hydrated. Can you help me? You have golf carts and you have, available people sitting around. I have none. Can you help me? Well, that call is made. And if we're friends, that's an easier decision on you to make because we are friends and we have a relationship. But if we've been ugly to one another, me sending bad emails to you saying that, I don't like the color of your blue shirt and I don't like your glasses and therefore don't ever talk to me. When we get to the venue and I make that call, that's a harder sell for me to ask you for help now because we haven't built that relationship. So to me, and this is universal and it goes, beyond games. If there were relationships built, if we would take the time to understand our common things we have in common versus our differences, if there were really true relationships built between one another, a lot of our issues in this world, and especially in events, could be solved based on that. If I knew that if you were my brother and we had a rapport, there would be nothing that I wouldn't do for you, with you, to make sure that you're successful, and vice versa. And that is what's missing. I think in our society, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but that is what is key in relationships, because you have a lot of times people coming from different locations that, they don't have family in those locations. So this event Gypsy community kind of blends together. And therefore, they not only do they work together, they play together, they go hiking together, they go play basketball together, they go swimming, they go eat, they go dancing, they do everything together. So now you have this family relationship, you have this more familiar relationship, and therefore when you make the call to ask for an additional accreditation, or you ask for an additional uniform because yours got messed up because of whatever the case may be, that's an easier sell when you make those phone calls as opposed to just cold calling. So that is, and I alluded to it, but I had a young man who, rightfully so, I shouldn't say rightfully, but he got his uniform dirty because he was helping, a car broke down, and he was, well versed in auto mechanics. So he helped the person fix their vehicle, and he got his uniform completely dirty. I mean, oil and whatever else was dirt was on his uniform. And I was like, you cannot represent logistics. Although we are a service function, we do work, you can't represent logistics like that. So I made a phone call to the uniform person, and shout out to Miss Virginia Wesley. She was able to give us another uniform, and all was lost. I mean, all was all saved. So based on those relationships, you can really solve a lot of problems. And we didn't have to go through fill out this form, let me get this approved by my manager. This isn't the proper way to do things, etc. You can bypass a lot of the procedures sometimes, and a lot of times when you have those relationships in place.
One of the things that really strikes me as you're talking about this is that when you do build relationships of trust with people, and you learn a little bit more about them, and you have that little motivation, your natural inclination when someone reaches out to you, your natural inclination is to help that person, to help that individual solve their problem, if you are in a position to do so. And if you're not in a position to do so, then to find the person who can help them solve their problem, right?
Absolutely.
And that really takes me to this point that was that we haven't really touched on yet in your bio, which is this idea I'm just reading it here. A devoted Christian, Michael is passionate about connecting the global logistics Ohana family and demonstrating the love of Christ through servant leadership. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit as we come to the conclusion of our conversation today, about how important it is for you to connect other people, to help other people, and to approach your role from a servant leadership perspective.
So I'll start with the Christian part, Christian. Play on words there. I want to say 10, 15 years ago, I really got serious about my walk with Christ. And I said, Lord, you got to help me with this. I want you to be my Lord, and I want to serve you. So I've tried to turn away from things that are not pleasing and representative of Christ. And so I have taken on this mantra of really walking it out, and not just talking about it, or not just wearing the name badge, or the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelet. So just walking it out in my everyday life. So I am really passionate about about that. Now, back stepping back, the Ohana family. I went on this vacation to Hawaii once, and I went on this. I went somewhere. I forgot the name of the place. It was a Hawaiian Cultural Center, and they were sharing what Ohana means. Now, I've never seen the movie Lilo and Stitch, so if you, for my friends who have seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But they described Ohana as two meanings: one, family, and no one gets left behind. And that really, really centered in me because that's who we are. We are a global family, whether we want to admit it or not. We're brothers and sisters sharing, with one another, entertaining, engaging, helping, assisting one another. We're a global family. So that really resonated with me. And I've tried to now recreate that in my professional work, professional world. So I have this thing, wherever I go to work, I don't hire just employees. I look for family members to hire, people that not only can I connect with right then in the moment when we are working, but also afterwards. So I introduced that very early in my professional, let's say, wherever I'm working. I introduced that very early, and again, try to walk that and live that out in my everyday basis. So what does that mean? It means investing your time to get to know one another, not just I hired you, go do this job. Sit down and talk with the person. Hi, where are you from? How many brothers and sisters do you have? What things motivate you? And really get to understand and know who they are. Invite them out to eat. And sometimes when I'm abroad, they invite me out to eat, and I love that. So keep it coming, everyone. Invite me out to eat, and I've been welcomed into people's homes, met family members, and I'm very happy to, even today, I have mothers and grandmothers that I try to check on every now and then just to see how they're doing, because they were very helpful to me. Sending food and just sending word and sending prayers a lot of time, just to ensure that this little black kid from South Carolina has a wonderful experience in their country. So trying to live that out and create this family, but not just create this family in this one city, create this family in other cities as well. So now I've been blessed to say that, I have this Ohana family in Russia, and I have this Ohana family in India and Indonesia, and people that I really try to stay connected with, even beyond the event's over. Stay connected and, send pictures. And WhatsApp has been very great for me to stay connected to people. I'm not on social media. I'm not on Facebook. But WhatsApp has been good. We exchange pictures of family members and kids. And I always tell them that we're connected for life. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for you that I wouldn't do for the next person. So if you need me, if you're on this planet, if you're in my country and you need me, I am there. And that answer is always yes. And that is how I've tried to live and breathe and operate, in my Ohana family. But it has been a lifelong dream of mine to just live out the principles of Christ, and to show that love. And as we've said before, if Jesus was walking amongst us now, he wouldn't be so divisive to separate us. He would bring us together by showing love and showing true genuine love. So that's been something that I've tried to emulate and instill in my professional life as well. Just showing love to one another, showing compassion, showing empathy, and just just operating, living that way.
I think it's beautiful, and it's a beautiful coda to our conversation here. Uh, as we get to the end, before we finish wrapping it up, did I leave any stories out? Did we leave anything off the list that we need to cover?
I do
Anything
want
that's not within the statute of limitations, or
to. I do want to give out a shout out to some other people that I did not mention that have been instrumental in me getting involved in this. And I mentioned Stuart Ash. He was a mentor of mine and teacher of mine. Also, a gentleman by the name of Grant Earnshaw, who is now working in British Columbia. He brought me over to Vancouver after I met him in Doha. And, I'm forgetting someone, and I don't want to do that. So I'm sorry. Because I wrote their names down, I want to make sure that I mentioned to everybody. But these people have been very, very good to me and showed me love and taught me things that were very helpful in my journey. So Daryl Collins, a gentleman who we've created, and we've talked about it a little bit. We've created this logistics university where we are now trying to reach out to that next generation of logistics and event people, because we know in the next, let's say, 10 years here in North America, we're going to have a nice string of international events that are coming, and some that may in 2027. Yeah, 2027, we may have another one, but we have some good events coming in the States. So I want to make sure that we reach out to the next generation of event logistics personnel, like that generation reached out to people like me. So Daryl Collins and I are working on this project where we have some digitized versions of training for being logistics managers. There's a gentleman by the name of Marvin Van. You may remember him as well. He was in Salt Lake City, but he has now passed away. And he was a very good mentor of mine who taught me some very key things about being a logistics manager and all. Also, Larry Shank and Craig Williams, two people that have really helped to mentor and shape me. So I want to give a shout out to all of those gentlemen, those men, to say thank you for reaching out and reaching back to get this little kid from South Carolina who didn't know anything. He didn't have a clue of what he was doing. But they really invested in me, and look at me now. I am, we talked about it earlier. I am now what they call an event expert, working with the International Olympic Committee and, advising on Winter Olympic operations. I am from South Carolina, Christian. We may get half an inch of snow out there, but I am a Winter Olympic expert because these men and women invested in me. So I am so appreciative, and I show them all the love, and I share in this journey with them because of them.
Fitting tribute. You mentioned this logistics university that you're creating with your counterpart there, and why don't you share some advice, some wisdom, if you will, with this next generation of event professionals that will come and support these events in the coming decade. We've got Copa America, we've got the World Cup, we've got LA 28. Rugby World Cup is coming to the U.S. Possibly women's FIFA Women's World Cup, and then Salt Lake 2034. So yes. In the next 10 years, 11 years, we have an abundance of very high-profile, large-scale international events coming to our shores, and we need more resource to help plan and deliver those. So, what advice would you give to someone who is considering possibly pursuing a career in this niche, in this space, in this vertical, or is just getting going in this career? What recommendations would you give to them?
I would say bring your passion. first and foremost, bring your passion and don't be afraid to show it each and every day. And don't be afraid to work hard. And everything that happens, and I know this generation gets a lot of flack about their work ethic and such, but don't be afraid to really, bring that every day. Bring that energy every day. Bring that compassion every day. Bring that passion every day. So that will be point number one. Point number two is more practical in terms of this event world is great. And it has afforded me the luxury of traveling around the world and seeing and meeting new people. But it is very cyclical, it's very seasonal. So to be very disciplined in your money to ensure that for those dry periods when you're in between events, you have some income or some residual income to help sustain you. You and I both know when you're working on these events, you're getting 10 to 15% higher if you were working in, let's say, in the corporate world. They do that to attract you out of that world, but they also give you the responsibility to manage your money. So again, you can, for those lean periods, you can sustain in between those periods. So I would say be very smart and deliberate with your money, and don't live above your means when you are traveling and working in this illustrious industry. Again, that to me is everything. You have to bring that energy. You have to bring your work. You can't be afraid to do the work because it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. It's going to, it's going to try you in every sense of the word, but it is ultimately rewarding and worth every minute of it.
Well, I'll give a big amen,
Amen.
to what you just said there, both in the more, you know, the more emotional element of it, which is finding that something that you can be really passionate about and that you truly love. And then the more pragmatic element, which is, hey, it is kind of feast or famine.
Yes.
And so be disciplined on in how you go about this career, so that you don't end up, falling off a cliff, financially speaking. So I think that's a great advice. If people, oh, you got one more thing.
One more thing, and you just reminded me of it, Christian. In this now information age, your name and your character means everything. So if you do a good job at event number one, your name and reputation will precede you. Conversely, if you do a terrible job at event number one, you don't meet deadlines, you don't do the work, you're not passionate, your reputation will precede you. So it will be hard for you to stay in this industry if you don't do that, if you're not consistent with it. So, and especially now, again, with you're as close to your next person as a couple of clicks on LinkedIn or a couple of instant messages on Facebook or TikTok or any other social media. So make sure you do the work and make sure you keep your nose clean, and be passionate, and then your reputation and the work will proceed and speak for you as you move on in your career. And you won't always know, who you're going to work with next. You won't know where your next paycheck is going to come from per se, but your reputation will definitely proceed because in this event world, it's very small. And again, you're two clicks from someone who knows you or knows of you and knows the work that you've done, and your reputation again will precede you. So,
Well, once again, very, very solid advice. And so, all of you young whippersnappers out there, you don't want, you know, totally wasted at a party up on TikTok or something like this, and then, so because that stuff matters. And so I
it
think,
does.
handling yourself professionally in your life and always, ensuring that your reputation's intact, I think is super important. Okay. If people want to reach out and connect with you, to become the next member of your Ohana family, what's the best way for people to actually come in contact with you?
So I am on LinkedIn. That's the only social media that I am on board with. So you reach out to me in LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me through email. I am MWING, so MWing2367 at gmail.com. So those are the best ways to reach out. Please give me a call or sorry, not call, reach out, and I will definitely respond to you. So that's the way to reach me.
All right, fantastic. Well, Michael, I hope you have a lovely Christmas season there in beautiful South Carolina. And I appreciate you taking, well, gosh, now it's been about an hour and a half of your day to have this conversation with me. It's been delightful. And I wish you all the best as you continue your work with the International Olympic Committee and other endeavors.
Christian, again, thank you for the work that you're doing and spreading the word and giving people like myself and others an opportunity to share our stories and our passions. So I salute you for doing what you do. Thank you again for the holiday wishes. I wish the same for you and your family. And until the next time, my friend, we'll see you.
All right, fantastic. Listeners and viewers, also thank you for joining us and listening to us share our stories today. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll catch you again soon. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.